Good evening, everyone. This is the Mount Pleasant Waterworks Tropical Update for Hurricane Irma. It is Thursday, September 7th, approximately 6:30 p.m. Well, it's been an interesting day and potentially a little bit of sigh of relief for the Charleston Mount Pleasant area, although as I've repeated numerous times, we have to be extremely careful not to get too comfortable or too worried about one particular forecast, and that's very true here as well. However, you can't help but feel a little bit better when the threat to your area begins to lessen, or appears to, at least for this forecast. So, here's the current 5 p.m. position of Irma, still 173 miles per hour. The pressure in the storm is still holding relatively stable. Track hasn't changed significantly for about the next 2 days, but then there begins to be a change. And immediately obvious is that the current forecast is predicting landfall at the tip of the Florida Peninsula and is currently keeping the center overland from that point on. Never makes it back to water, although it's very, very close here. So that is definitely a change from what we've been seeing, and we'll look at kind of why that change is. But again, just a word of caution. Remember that it can shift back, and that's absolutely still a possibility. So we can't let our guards down, but I certainly not happy about this for Florida, and not happy for family members I have in this part of Florida. But for the Charleston area and Georgia, South Carolina coast, this is possibly good news. So enough about that. Let's look at some of the models. So these are the latest hurricane track models. Excuse me. Still a cluster of models that are hanging offshore. You can see that bend to the west we're talking about, that many of them, most of them in fact, are showing. The kind of the consensus of this pack of models has moved back a little bit to the Georgia coast. So here's the official forecast. It's a little west of this particular set of models. So we'll see what happens with that. But what's happened during the day is there have been a couple of models that shifted to the west overnight and early this morning. You see several lines over here, ones that shifted, doing this curve a little bit later than we've been seeing, which brings the track a little farther west. A couple of models that don't show up on here also did the same thing, either overnight or through the day today. And as a result, the Hurricane Center's forecast has now kind of shifted with some of these models that carry a lot of weight. Some of these aren't quite so well respected as far as what factors into their forecast. So for now, looks like a landfall based on this forecast of very central South Florida staying over Florida the entire time, which is not good news for Florida. So there's your track models. The other thing I wanted to show you is the wind analysis based on the current forecast again. So now if we look at where Mount Pleasant, Charleston area, we are barely on the outer fringe of the lower category tropical storm force winds. So this morning we were in the kind of the center of this dark gray, the heavier tropical storm force. Previous to that, we were kind of on the verge of the hurricane force wind. So at the moment, we're in the very outer edge of tropical storm force winds. If this proved 100% true, and this is exactly what the storm did, it's unlikely we would actually see sustained tropical storm force winds. We would probably see tropical storm force gusts, but doubtful that this far out on the wind field. If all of this were perfectly true when it made landfall, or as it passed our area, we would probably not see actual sustained tropical storm force winds. So that's the wind bands. The other thing, let's look at timing. So from the National Hurricane Center, here's the most likely arrival time graphic based on the current forecast. And we're still in the Monday morning time frame if tropical storm force winds reach us. Monday morning-ish, so give or take. Again, this is a rather rough estimate and probably a tad on the conservative side. All right, so why the shift and what are the latest global models doing and thinking? So let's look at the European first today, because this is a run from this morning. So this is one of the reasons that the official forecast track shifted to the west, because the latest run, which came out this morning of the European, as I move it forward, has it going a little further west, back to where the European was kind of persistent on somewhere around this near the Keys, sort of southwest coast of Florida. It's kind of hung in there. It strayed away from there a few times, but it's been persistently either staying on or coming back to landfall somewhere in that area, and it's come back to that again. Now here it is 24 hours later in north central Florida, overland, and now moving up through Georgia. So that's what the European this morning when it came out was thinking. That kind of fell in line with some of the other models. This has been a good performer for the storm and is one of the most respected global models. The National Hurricane Center puts a lot of stock in what this model says. It's done well with this storm, so that's influencing their track definitely, and probably rightfully so. Here's the GFS that just is actually coming out right now. I don't have the full run, but I've got enough to show you what's going on right now. So as I move it forward, remember the GFS has been persisting on either barely brushing the Miami, Fort Lauderdale coast, or staying just offshore as it passed by there. So now when we move it forward, it's showing landfall, a good solid landfall. Miami, maybe just a hair west of Miami. And then moving over the coast, kind of splitting the coast, right at the coast, and now bending a little bit and moving into Georgia. So pretty good agreement on these two global models at the moment. Some of the other hurricane models are kind of in line with them, and that has definitely impacted the National Hurricane Center's forecast. And as I've mentioned, they have a lot of other cool stuff they're able to see that we're not able to see, that obviously is telling them the same thing. So that's it for today. Here's our current forecast given what we know right now. Again, looks good, feels good. Seems to be a little bit of relief, but I just caution everyone again, don't get too worked up one way or the other about one forecast, because this is far from over. Exactly when this turn happens, where this turn happens, how sharply this turn happens. There's still a lot of variables there and a lot of possibilities. And just to show you that, I'll plot. We haven't looked at this in a while. If I plot the error cones, so this green shaded area is the average error during the first 3-day forecast. And what that means is this point, this is their 3-day forecast point. This error cone, or cone of uncertainty, means that that point, the very center of the eye, could very well be anywhere within this. Basically, imagine a green circle around that point. That's the average error that far out into the forecast. That dot, that single point, could be anywhere within the circle based on past actual errors. So nothing's out of the question yet. It cannot be ruled out that it misses Florida on this side. It cannot be ruled out that it misses Florida on this side. Those are both possibilities. And then as you go further out in time, the error gets larger just because it's predicting further into the future. So anywhere inside this cone needs to be paying attention, and that does not change just because this one forecast seems a little better. So that's it for tonight. We'll see what overnight does and tomorrow morning does. For us in Mount Pleasant, Charleston, if it's not going to recurve and miss everybody, this makes us in a much, much, much lower threat category. This is not going to be good for Florida at all. This damaging hurricane reaching them probably 140, 150 miles per hour at landfall is going to cause a vast amount of damage in these heavily populated areas up here. So this scenario is not good for them. Prayers are with them. That's it for tonight. Another update will be tomorrow. Stay tuned.